All right, well, I'll go ahead and kick us off. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, Manufacturing and Regional Development, Perspectives from the Manufacturing Community of Practice. My name is Dion Thompson-Davily, and I'm a program manager with NATO. And I'm pleased to be joined by the following three individuals. We have Matt Bogosian, the Executive Director of AMCC, the American Manufacturing Communities Collaborative, as well as the lead of the Manufacturing Community of Practice. With Matthew is David Van Sicklen, who's the operations manager with AMCC. And then finally, we have Nico Thomas, who came in as David Van Sicklen, but I think has adjusted his name now. Nico's a performance analyst with the National Institute of Science and Technology. A couple months ago, AMCC reached out to NATO and said they wanted to share this new playbook that they were working on, the Manufacturing Ecosystem Metrics Playbook, if I have that correct. And we said that'd be great, and we'd love to get it out to our audience. So we're glad you all have come today to hear what they've been working on and how you can apply that playbook and other AMCC and manufacturing community of practice work in your communities. Just some housekeeping as we get started. This webinar is brought to you in part by the Economic Development District Community of Practice, community of one of seven EDA communities of practice alongside AMCCs. And I just have to say that the views, opinions, et cetera, that are made here on the call today are those of the panelists and don't reflect necessarily those of the Economic Development Administration. A couple other notes: if you have questions as we go, please feel free to put them in the chat. And if we have time at the end, we'll get to those questions, and we'll also have a chance for you to come off mute, potentially, depending on time, and ask any additional questions that you have then. At the end of the webinar, there will pop up a survey through Zoom when you close out. If you wouldn't mind just filling out a few quick questions, that would be helpful to us so that we can continue to deliver useful materials to you in the future, or answer any additional questions that you might have. So with that quick intro out of the way, I will go ahead and pass it over to David, who I believe is going to share his slides and kick us off.
Yeah, thanks, Dion. I will in a moment, but we're gonna let Nico go first because I think he's got a conflict. Yeah.
Great. So can you hear me well?
Yes.
Great. Excellent. So it's a pleasure to be here with everybody. My name is Nico Thomas. As noted, I am a performance analyst with NIST MEP, specifically our Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program, where we have 51 partners in every state plus Puerto Rico who are boots on the ground working with local regional economies to serve small and medium-sized manufacturers all across the country. So we have a presence in every regional manufacturing ecosystem in the United States. And we can tell you from firsthand experiences just how different each one of those regional manufacturing ecosystems are. So we have a real passion for, one, making sure that our MEP Center partners are embedded in each of those manufacturing ecosystems, but then two, to better understand the nuances that are different between each of those ecosystems. Because as our MEP centers would tell you, every region is its own special flower and has its own special circumstances. So the more we can better understand that, the more we can better identify like regional communities, the more we can identify other communities that are going through the same challenges, the better chance we have at helping those manufacturing communities overcome the challenges and progress forward to something greater than the parts. So I am calling today from Austin, Texas. I'm here visiting our Texas MEP Center, TMEC. And this has been a great conference so far. We've had a chance to really engage and listen to stakeholders all across the manufacturing ecosystem in Texas. And one thing that was really interesting to us is the head of one of the business development agencies here in the state, the governor's office, noted that there's 254 counties in the state of Texas. Now, the state has resources that they use to support those counties, but each of those 254 counties are responsible with coming up with their own ways in which they want to move their economic development forward. They have to have their own strategies, their own understanding of their local ecosystem, and that even differs within the state of Texas. Imagine just 254 counties differing versus all the counties across all the United States. So that is just really illuminating. And it's a reason why NIST MEP is really interested and has partnered with the AMCC on this manufacturing community ecosystem metrics. It's important for us to create a common language that we can all speak to create a common tool that we can all leverage to help us understand our playing field. There's a lot of differences between each different community, each different district, but if we were able to provide a tool that can help level the playing field so that all communities can read from the same playbook to really self-assess and understand what your unique strengths, capabilities, and opportunities are, that can really help move our economic development efforts forward. There's so much investment, there's so much opportunity when it comes to strengthening U.S. manufacturing and what it can do for our local economic interests and necessities. And we are committed to doing so. So the manufacturing community ecosystem metrics is a playbook and a tool that's really one of a kind that can help communities understand their unique situations, to fully understand the environment that you're operating in, and to really link together those different ecosystem players where, if all pointing in the same direction, could really help the community achieve a greater result than what would be achieved in operating in isolation. So just wanted to pop in and just reinforce how committed we are to this effort, how important it is to build out a playbook and to build out a common language from which all of our communities can understand and self-assess their unique regions, and for us to, one, not try to change every region, but just better understand every region to determine how we can best position those communities to succeed with the interventions that are coming from all these different places, and a lot coming from the federal government as well. So happy to be here, Matt, David, Dion. It's a pleasure to meet everybody. I will have to hop off shortly because I'm presenting to my Texas colleagues, but I wanted to hop on and just represent NIST MEP and our partnership with AMCC on this very important project. So back to you, Matt, David.
Great. Thanks, Nico. And appreciate your leadership. Dion, thank you for your partnership in putting this on in NATO and all the good hard work that happens in that community of practice with the EDDs. It's good to know you guys. I'm Matt Bogosian, Executive Director of AMCC. This is David Van Sicklen, our Operations Director. And we want to I want to give you kind of, before we get to the tool and the playbook, I want to give you a little bit. This thing's been under, construction in one way or another for 10, 15 years. And so we want to tell a little bit of the story of AMCC. Like Dion said, we're designated by EDA as the nation's manufacturing community of practice. And not in a silo. This is a big ecosystem of support that we need to strengthen around the country. And so, collaborating with all these different communities of practice and all the different interventions, like Nico is saying, and Dion clearly knows with the NATO team, is all of our jobs, right? And so. Let me start first. So you can see there on the slide David put up there, that's who we are in our background. And we have, a lot of regional stakeholders. But the story behind that, starts back in 2014 around a initiative, 10 federal agency initiative, if you can believe it. We worked with 10 federal agencies. You talk about herding cats, right? We put together one initiative called IMCP. You can see it there. And this is with work with the National Economic Council in trying to identify what are the component parts of a thriving regional manufacturing community. The manufacturers at Nico and MEP, they identify about 250,000 manufacturers we have around the country. So in your economic development districts, there are undoubtedly manufacturers in a particular sector. MEPs try to help those manufacturers, and the manufacturing cornerstone, as the overwhelming evidence demonstrates, is really the cornerstone of economic development in many, many regards. And so this work with the National Economic Council identified these 6 areas of a thriving regional manufacturing ecosystem that they have to be operating sufficiently in all 6 of these areas in a region for the manufacturers in that region to thrive. So there's the manufacturers, and then there's this ecosystem of support around the manufacturers that need to be operating. And so over this 10 federal agency initiative, because all these different agencies have an important equity to, that land in regions, but they're not woven together sufficiently, right? And so certainly, EDA in commerce is an important federal agency intervention, as you guys know very well, but there's all these other federal agency interventions. And so this multi-agency initiative led to a 2-year pilot of designating 24 regions around the country that put together these plans around the big six, one or more of those big six elements to strengthen their regional manufacturing ecosystem. And so those regions not only developed strong public-private partnerships around those themes, but even after the pilot sunsetted, they stayed together and also started to engage with one another around the country. And they they got together in 2018, 2019, because they didn't want this policy intervention model to die on the vine. And so they co-created AMCC as a national network to try to advance more of these federal bottom-up policy initiatives. And so the game in town at the time from the Department of Defense was around strengthening the defense industrial base in regions where you are all around the country. And so DoD created a new program, the Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program. And no surprise, many of the regions that were already building good, strong public-private partnerships in the previous IMCP program did very well in this new DoD program for the defense industrial base. And it's because, as you guys know very well, it takes time to build trust amongst public-private stakeholders in a region so that you can actually kind of identify common objectives and work together to accomplish, better outcomes for the manufacturers for economic development. The crossover over the years of doing this work, the crossover between the manufacturing cornerstone and economic development in general just became, overwhelming. And so when the next Congress came in, the next administration, they took this model and single agency at a time, but it got embedded in many of the big pieces of legislation. Oh, this is the map of the defense one. 23 defense regions were created under the DoD program. Many of them were former IMCP regions who had the stronger muscle of working better together. Then the next administration came in and a whole slew of single agency bottom-up initiatives that you'll recognize some of those names, the Build Back Better Regional Challenge, the NSF engines, et cetera. All of those are landing in regions, asking regional stakeholders to put together these public-private partnerships to carry out this activity. Meanwhile, we've got this, existing EDD, federal intervention, right? And so I'm sure you guys have been confronted by the Wild West of all of these bottom-up initiatives. And so it's an interesting era of federal interventions that we need to co-create better structures to bring them all together, because these in the manufacturing and economic development world, many of the federal interventions, are siloed. Most of them, I would say, are siloed agency by agency, even though they relate to one another in really important ways. And so our network along the way got designated by EDA, as Dion said, as the nation's manufacturing community of practice. But we've been operating as a network. We have a couple of weekly activities that have been happening for years, way before our federal designation. A half-hour weekly call, which is a constant feedback loop with stakeholders around the country. I think I recognize some of the folks on our calls are in on this call, and economic development district. So invite you all to participate in that 30-minute call, a lurk if you want, join and introduce yourselves. David can set you up to be on those calls. They're every Monday at 11:30 Eastern time for 30 minutes, happening for about a decade. So they're a great feedback loop, a great place to share best practices, and learn best practices that you can help your regions strengthen the ecosystem of support around the manufacturing cornerstone. The other weekly activity we have is this AMCC update newsletter that you and your networks can get. It's free. Again, both of these things are free, open source. And you can share that and use it as a potential platform to get information that you guys have. I know our friends Dion and NATO and other communities of practice, other BFF stakeholders in both the federal government and nonprofit organizations, et cetera, use the AMCC network and these two activities to get really cool best practices out, that matter. And so we always invite you to get the newsletter, share the newsletter, but also provide us input into it, right? That's what makes it strong. And we're not trying to own the universe. We're just trying to work better with everyone together to advance American prosperity. And so where we've gotten to, we're going to get to this tool and playbook here in a second, but this is important. Kind of three-part framework that we've learned over the years is really essential to help regions get their arms around the complex system that they are a part of, right? It's overwhelming at a time, right? There's so many things going on. How do you prioritize? And so this is the way we help regions come together, which leads to the tool and playbook that David's going to talk more specifically about. One is is it all manufacturing? Well, we tether this to this 2021 report about kind of key manufacturing industries that need to be thriving for the long term. So we encourage regions to really look at, nurturing their manufacturing in areas that are going to be good for the long term, right? Because you want your regions to be well positioned long term. So those are, big overlapping areas of defense, energy, transportation, ag, IT, and health. And then, of course, there's got to be enabling new technologies within those industries and the manufacturers in your region, right? And so there's all of this new technology, lots of stuff we could share around there, but it's a useful framing. It's the industries and the technologies in your region, what's happening there, how do we nurture that ecosystem of support there? But then it gets back to that big six element. It's like, okay, in my region, all right, what has to be operating sufficiently for our manufacturers to thrive, right? Your economic development districts and economic developers have a key role in this and bringing these right stakeholders together to add value in this complex system. And so this gets back to that, 10 years ago with the National Economic Council. This has been a decade-long hypothesis that has got a lot of anecdotal support, which has really led to the development of the tool and playbook with NIST, because we need to get from anecdotal evidence, right, to more a more detailed evidence-based set of assessments so that we can create smarter interventions that have a stronger correlation to the outcomes that we want to have. And everyone has a role. Economic developers have a role, but there's technical roles. There's the financial and legal ecosystem, education, of course, around workforce. So every region, all of these different stakeholders have to start rowing in the same direction. And it's challenging. It's really an organizational challenge, a leadership challenge. And so that's the second, pillar. And then the third one is, what are we shooting for? And that's sustainable development, economic competitiveness for our companies and our good paying salaries and wages to lift families, including so many more. We need tons of people in the manufacturing ecosystem working there, and those can be good paying jobs. And and of course, environmental sustainability and national security, which lines up right with the CHIPS and Science Act, what the big geo-national and social challenges that this country has to face for the long term. So that's our North Star. But, you know, what do we do every day in your economic development district with your stakeholders? Well, we build relationships. That's what we're doing here, right? We're building cross-pollinating relationships of trust, and building common narratives, strategizing where it makes sense for common activities, and really getting to better structures. AMCC has learned over the years, you know, and we have this NIST MEP, you know, Nico was talking about that, but it's not easy to work together. It takes persistence, and we're co-creating a series of new attempts at better structures in this country, but we need tools and tactics to do that. We need evidence, and that's where the manufacturing community ecosystem metrics tool and playbook come in. So let me hand that off to you, David, to describe this several-year journey that we have with other federal agencies, with Deloitte, and our efforts to pilot it in other regions. Go ahead.
Thanks for that, Matt. And hi, everyone. Again, I'm David Van Sicklen. I'm the operations director here at AMCC. First off, I'm a visual learner, so I put together a lot of slides. So if you are not a fan of being bombarded by slides, apologies in advance, because I have several more here to describe exactly how we've been working on this ecosystem metrics tool. The first thing that I'll say is what we have here is not a panacea, right? Instead, this is really a humble effort to try and understand first how regions are doing this now. How do you go and investigate what your manufacturing composition is and what all the different helper organizations in your regions are doing to support the outcomes you hope to see, like workforce development outcomes, improved capital access coming to your region, expanded infrastructure to support new manufacturing expansion, right? There's all these different outcomes that regions have, and they're different from place to place. There's a different set of stakeholders from place to place. So we're really finding that you have to form fit your own strategy to do this gap analysis across some of these big pillars for your manufacturing ecosystem. So I'll go through a little bit of what we've done, and I also want to show a little bit of what others out there have been doing. So you've got an idea of the playing field, and I think still, you know, we've still got a pretty good ways to go, because if you look at tools that take federal or national data and you try to apply it directly to your region, you'll often find that it's insufficient, right? I mean, we could talk all day long about how NAICS codes don't properly manage your, you don't have proper insight into your industrial composition just looking at NAICS codes, for example. But also, all of you, your work probably doesn't just end at a county line or a state line if you're on the state boundary, right? The reality of these ecosystems is that they're rather organic, and that there are people and organizations that move in and out. Sometimes they're really important and influential players, other times not so much. There's probably organizations that are situated in a different state that might have a really big impact on the functioning of your specific location's manufacturing ecosystem. So there's a lot of variation in here. So part of what we're trying to do is take both publicly available national data and compare and combine that with more organically sourced data from the actual stakeholders and participants who are getting things done in the region. So we're really looking at both of those two things. How do we put them up against each other, identify the gaps that reveals, and then make smarter interventions that solve and shore up some of those gaps. So just for a visual expression of what we're talking about on this term of metrics, right? Because metrics, that word comes with a lot of baggage. So what we're talking about is ecosystem metrics, right? And there's how we divvy it up is this way. First, there's manufacturer metrics, and this is generally captured by NIST MEP. This is their throughput, their employment, and so on and so forth, their overall productivity. That information is generally being captured. And then you have on the other side of the coin these, we'll call them programmatic metrics. So you get a grant from the federal government or from the state or from a private institution. You probably have some specific deliverables that you have to report back. So that's a programmatic metrics. What did you do with that one program? What we're looking at is this sort of middle band of ecosystem metrics. When you have all these different interventions coming into a system that are trying to produce some outcome, how does the collective action of all of those different interventions or all of those different programs build up to something that you can see and feel with your target population? For us, it's manufacturers. So that's how we sort of think through the specific band of metrics that we're trying to get at. These are really action-oriented metrics, so you understand how your region is doing, what its strengths and what its gaps are, and how you could put in that one extra step of a program, that one new investment that you need to get to some more sophisticated stage of your region. So another illustration here to get a little bit what I'm talking about around this organic stakeholder data. So AMCC was founded by those 24 different IMCP regions back in 2014, 2015. This is the makeup of stakeholders that the Connecticut IMCP group self-reported. And what they were trying to do is they were trying to get these people together and to build some productive partnerships that improved workforce development outcomes and that also improved research and innovation, the research and innovation ecosystem to help new entrepreneurs and businesses ramp up towards commercialization. And so the question is, how do all of these people coming together and partnering create a whole more than the sum of parts? And to think about that visually is you've got, again, an intervention in the top left that's coming into the system. It's maybe state dollars, it's maybe federal dollars, could be non-dollars, it could be technical assistance. It's still an intervention, something that's trying to change the operation or the function of the system to produce some desired outcome. And these are all the players again. This is sort of the soup of regions partnership. And the question we're trying to get at is, how do the linkages and partnerships between all of these produce those desired outcomes? How can we do some of this investigative work, but try to do it in a quicker, more structured framework so any region could do it, not just the ones with the mean, the time, the capacity to do it. So these are really the main three objectives of our MCEM playbook. And that's first, how do you identify who those key players are, what the key assets are, what are the interventions coming to a system, and what are the outcomes that you're trying to produce? How can you then go about measuring each of those component parts to develop an aggregate understanding of what's happening in these, what we define as these big 6 areas that need to be functioning in a manufacturing ecosystem for manufacturers to thrive? You could develop a similar framework. I'm pretty sure most people on this call might be familiar with Argonne National Labs. They have an economic development capacity index. They break their index into 5 different categories: human capital, financial, infrastructure partnerships, one other. So there's other ways that you could break this down, but we've found time and time again that this really resonates with manufacturers we speak to and the stakeholders around them. And then ultimately what you're trying to do with this information is, how can we develop very specific battle plans, very specific strategies that would support some gap that we identified in our ecosystem. And so I want to illustrate it with a pilot project that we did in Utah. So we organized these partners down there in the bottom right with a couple of key organizations helping us lead. And we just did a couple of workshops. We first asked people to actually visually map out, we focus this one on workforce specifically, map out who the key workforce players are in the greater Salt Lake City area relevant to your key manufacturing industries. And we had, gosh, maybe 15 or so people in the room, another 10 on Zoom come in. And by the end of about an hour, hour and a half, we built this very, very simple network map, which started us on the path of, okay, based on the partners that are in the room, what parts of the workforce ecosystem in Utah are we missing? Who do we need to go out and find next to help us build this map out? So we used good old-fashioned snowball sampling. We asked each of the participants to go to their partners and ask them the same questions we asked them. And over 2 more virtual calls, we built out a more advanced map to understand who the different stakeholders are in the workforce side. And then we posed them this hypothetical challenge that you see on the left. This hypothetical challenge is, say Utah government comes out and says, hey, we've got this big training deficit where we're 10,000 skilled workers per year under where we need to get to. What can our workforce system do to solve that gap? And we gave just some general different skill attainment bands as an example. We focused this pilot around the Utah MEP Alliance. So the MEP, that's part of what Nico Thomas at NIST was just talking about. This Utah MEP is a little bit unique in that they don't have their own institution, so to speak. Instead, it's actually a partnership of these 7 organizations that you see on the right. These organizations have all signed MOUs with one another to designate what their respective lanes of activity are. And so they can actually refer manufacturers very quickly between their different services to help their specific manufacturers much faster. So we went to this group and we said, hey, who are you working with? Who are your key workforce partners? And over those 3 different meetings, we built out this network map. And this network map charts some of the money coming into the system, who is administering the program funding to those specific workforce programs, and then who's actually doing the training of those programs, what community colleges and universities, where are students actually getting trained. You can really see this when you look at one loop of this system. This is a loop around the Talent Ready Connections program, which is a community college level credential program in the region. So you can see over on the right there, those yellow circles with the red lines are interventions, so funding coming into the zone. The governor's office is partnered with the Utah System of Higher Education to put on the Talent Ready Connections program, and then those are the organizations actually doing the training. And we started asking for some information from each one of these different nodes. So for the trainers, how many people are you training? What's your average cost per trainee? For the interventions, how much funding is coming into the system? Is there specific programmatic metrics that you have to accomplish connected to that funding? What is the goal of what you're trying to do with those dollars? And then most interesting to me is, what are the relational metrics between these different organizations? How are you guys partnered together? Do you meet weekly? Do you have a monthly luncheon together? Do you share staff? Do you share money? What's the degree of partnership that you're already engaged with other key workforce stakeholders in your system? From that, we were able to start aggregating up the information that we received. So these are like the 12 different titled initiatives that the stakeholders in the room were able to identify. And you can start aggregating it up to see how far away are we actually from that demand signal that was initially posed to the group. And you could see they're not as far away as it initially looked, although they do have some gaps. And now that they see these gaps more clearly, they can maybe look through that network map that they created to say, which one of our partners could shore up that gap? Who just needs that one extra piece of funding to add a bunch of students into the mix, for example, right? This is going to be totally different from place to place, but the framework of investigation, the methodology can be applied. It can be applied rather quickly, and it can be done so with a broad group of partners to help them coordinate better together in real time. It's not just looking backwards at metrics that were produced that show, what happened in 2023 or 2022. This is about, what are we actually doing right now? Who are the people that we are working with, and who else should we be inviting into this system to help us close whatever gap or whatever challenge we identified? So again, these are the 3 big steps: identifying those specific stakeholders, their assets, the interventions, and the programs. Developing the right indicator metrics that you're going to use for getting more focused on what that gap is, and then developing the resultant strategy to shore up the gap. A few of the we've of course been on the road doing these sorts of presentations about the manufacturing community ecosystem metrics project, and these are some of the benefits that we've heard from some of the different workshops we've put on. Really, the short-term thing is these are about metrics for coordination. These are action-oriented. What's actually happening right now? How does that relate to federal or national data that we benchmark against? And how can we align our partners to move together faster in a more aligned strategy? But when you think out midterm and long term, we're actually getting at what I think is one of the most compelling arguments for long-term durable public-private partnerships, is that you're seeing the transformation or evolution of a region over time. If you were to take the year 0 map and then you were to redo that year 1 and year 2 and year 3, you're going to see a transformation of how organizations are working together. Perhaps by year 2, because these Utah workforce partners have been able to identify what their specific gaps are, they've been able to go out and craft more compelling narratives for specific funding programs, for different grants that have allowed them to bring in new partners or to increase the partnerships that they're already existing. So you're now being able to show over time the changing composition of your partners in a location, which I think is really, really valuable for showing how this isn't, it can be easy for public-private partnerships to fall by the wayside when there's no longer that next step in the funding timeline, right? Grants will dry up and then you've got to pivot to the next thing. And doing that pivot is something that regional leaders do all the time, and it's very, very time consuming. So if you can show the sort of regional trajectory that you're trying to head towards, you can really, doing this work can really strengthen that sort of narrative that you're trying to communicate to whoever it may be, to the state, feds, or otherwise. I'll speak a little bit more to some of the work we've done since some of those pilots. So we had an excellent group of graduate students from Carnegie Mellon who helped us build out the framework for all of the other Big 6 areas past just the workforce that we did in Utah. So this group, and I can send, maybe I'll show some visualizations that they put together later, but this group built out for the same Utah stakeholders very similar investigations into those other 5 pillars of that Big 6 framework. It's identifying the stakeholders, identifying the indicator metrics, and deriving a gap analysis from those 2 pieces of information. I already talked about the EDCI tool, which I'll go back. This again shows how they break it up. It's not quite the Big 6, but you can see a similar logic here. And for each one of those pillars, they've got all these different indicator metrics. Now it's left to you or left to the region to select which of those indicators is actually most compelling and most relevant to the issues that you see on the ground. And so part of that is our argument that you need to have that organic data to supplement the national information that's available. It's just another visual. One of our key partners here is Deloitte. So Deloitte does do this work as a service, I understand, but of course not everywhere in the country can afford to pay for the full package that comes with a consultancy like Deloitte. But I still think it's very interesting to see how they think through a similar sort of problem. They have this as sort of their wicked problem, right? Whatever that might be, it needs to be form fitted to the specific location. And whatever that problem is, it defines who the players are. So you do that network graph of who's actually working on this, who do I need to have aligned with me? What are the different incentives of those stakeholders? What's some of the risks that might be keeping them from participating with me? Is there a way that I can do a root cause analysis to try and align people in a similar direction so that we're actually rowing in the same direction and producing good outcomes for my region? And then how I do all that defines then the interventions that need to be made either by me, my ecosystem, or I need to then go out to a funder or some other maybe state level partner to help me start implementing some of these gaps that I've identified. The last thing that I'll show here is just some future work that we're working on right now. So we hold bi-weekly meetings with several federal agency representatives. You, of course, saw Nico Thomas, but we've also got representatives from defense, labor, energy, small business. NSF comes in and out every so often, but they're all interested in for themselves and for their programs is how do we understand how our programs are engendering more durable public-private partnerships that last for the long term. I don't think they have it figured out either. I've yet to see a framework that accurately captures what's happening here. And ours, of course, still needs a lot of development too. I think that there's a ton of progress that we still could make, and we need a lot of helpers in order to do it. We're also working with Argonne National Labs now to be more specific about how our MCEM tool and how the EDCI tool are really very complementary with each other and could be used in tandem right now, both as free things that any region could take and start doing some of this investigation work. So I'd be happy to share a little bit more on like what the Carnegie Mellon students have done, but I know I've shown just a bunch of slides here, so maybe I'll take a second and we can see if anyone has any, instant feedback or thoughts, any reactions to this, because I know I threw a lot at you.
Yeah, and if you have any comments, feel free to come off mute. You should have that ability and just go ahead and speak up.
One thing I'll show, pull this up. So this was some awesome visualizations that the students in Carnegie Mellon did. You can see right now I'm on their supply chain focus. And so they took data. This data was actually obtained from Connex Marketplace, which many states and state MEPs work with Connex Marketplace to essentially inventory their state's manufacturers. And it is actually meant as a marketplace for manufacturers to find one another, to find suppliers that have different capabilities. And so some of the interesting things here is you can see the materials that the manufacturers work with. You can see them broken out by NAICS codes. You can see a breakdown of the types of industries served by the manufacturers in Utah. And one of the most compelling pieces here for me is you can also see it by processes. And this is an interesting piece for manufacturers looking to find new business. If they've got a process that could go towards producing a new component that currently they do not produce, if they understand and are able to promote what they are capable of rather than what they already make today, they could find more business faster. So I think that's a very interesting piece of data that you could visualize. But I could go through all of these, and it's very much the same. On the infrastructure side, we talked about what are the different sorts of enabling infrastructure in for energy, for example. How does that stack up to other states? Water supply, both of these very important for manufacturers, is having available water and energy. But in any case, I'm more than happy to share all this, but I won't go into too much
one
more
thing I'd like
detail.
to point out is, this is broader than most EDDs, have been, involved in. So there's the SEDS process, and economic development and manufacturing hasn't, traditionally crossed over as we've learned over the decade, hasn't crossed over as much as it should. I mean, we have a partnership with the International Economic Development Council, IEDC, on working together to try to change that. This bottom-up approach that we've been talking about this whole time, has led to some jurisdictions really adopting it in a full-throated manner. And the one I want to cite is California. So California just came out with an economic blueprint, and they have invested over the course of the last couple of years in this program called California Jobs First, where they broke the state into 13 sub-regions. Gave them each a bit of money to put together regional battle plans that include industrial manufacturing to kind of help solve for this problem. And as a state, comprehensively, they submitted all 13 comprehensively to EDA to get designated as the SEDS. that have manufacturing industrial production as a component part for almost all of those 13 sub-regional plans. And so, we're all in this together. We all got to figure out how to work better together. And we've seen across the country, the challenge that it is. I see on the call Sally Hanley from Peoria, one of our longtime participants. Sally, maybe you could come off mute and chime in and talk about the challenge it is to get economic development, integrated in the manufacturing ecosystem and vice versa. But it's doable, yeah.
Sure. Yes, we have a lot of engagement from our MEP. So it's the Illinois Manufacturing Extension Excellence Center, excuse me. And they help us when we go out to our business visits and make sure that we are assessing the needs of the manufacturers and providing the assistance needed. But it is a large region. We have 5 counties. We have quite a bit of diversification within our manufacturing group. So it takes a village, as Matt always says, to be able to pull together those resources. And we're fortunate to have some good partners. And that's relationships and partners mean a lot to move it forward.
Thanks, Sally. Yeah, it's not easy and it takes constant work. But, having new and better tools is super important. And that's why this project is so important. We have all of this siloed public-facing data that's not woven together in, a useful way. And so that's what this project is really trying to get at. And this 1.0 version of the playbook, David can post it again in the chat at the bottom or whatever. Please take a look at it and give us feedback, on does it make sense to you? And if not, why not? Or what else is happening out there that could align with it? That's how we got connected with Argonne National Laboratory, right? They're leaning in to economic development data and assessment, and no one's trying to own this activity. We need to come together and make it so every region in the country, to David's point, they don't have to drop 200 grand, to get like a really a useful tool and assessment of their regional ecosystem, so they can craft smarter, more effective outcome producing interventions. So questions. This is a good time. We've got 10 minutes left, right? And so it's intimidating. It's overwhelming because each one of us just have our particular perch from which we operate, and so getting connected to your state's manufacturing extension partnership could be an early activity to kind of understand better what manufacturing looks like in your neck of the woods, and then you could share what you're doing in your economic development district, right? That could be an early activity to get into the game. Many of you are probably already in the game and doing some of this good hard work, and we'd like to learn from you about how to do it better. You could express that directly to us by email, by joining our 30-minute Monday calls, by sending us information on that we could include in our AMCC update that goes out every week. I don't know. Other ideas, David, Dion, like how do we create more collective impact here? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll speak up. I think economic developers are all really used to ecosystem mapping in some form or another. But what I thought was valuable about this playbook, reading through it, and about David's presentation really, is visualizing how interventions move through the ecosystem that you have, especially because we all have more and more tools available to us, all the time. More data is online, it's easier to access, it's open source. But so wrapping your arms around all of that is a distinct challenge, and aligning it in your head really with like the actual intervention that you are trying to make, that you are trying to guide through a system, is challenging. So I think that's somewhere that this playbook is really useful. And then I will Catherine and I will go ahead and drop a link down there for you. But yeah, joining the Monday calls has been valuable for me personally, and I think that if you are interested in this area, it's just a great way to hear from people you wouldn't necessarily stumble across, outside of conferences or things of that nature. But just hearing their ideas in a brief 30-minute format and being connected to them on those calls is really valuable. So yeah, the stuff that AMCC is doing, I think is great. I appreciate this partnership with them, and I appreciate you two being on today.
Yeah, likewise, Dion. Yeah, happy to stay on till the top of the hour if people have questions or suggestions. Yeah, that's how we get better, right? Is by taking good, cool stuff that's happening in your region, bring it on, right? That's what we want to elevate. That's one of the cool things about our 2 weekly things. It's a really a great forum to elevate things that are working in different regions. And we have this big emphasis. I mean, we really have, I would argue, for the last 10 years in manufacturing, right? In one form or another. We've got a new version of that right now. Regardless, for example, I was just at a conference, you guys, yesterday around the defense manufacturing industry, right? So, we're in this international competition with China, and we need to work better together in building ships, our aerospace industry. Those defense industries really need regions to come together and add value to help their manufacturers, make smarter products that improve our national security. That's just one example of one of those sub areas of kind of priority manufacturing industries. So it's really a national challenge that's incumbent upon all of us in our regions to work more collaborative, in a more collaborative fashion. Yeah.
And Matt, I think you have a question there in the chat about your.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, the road shows. Okay, so AMCC does these 2 weekly virtual things, right? We also do in-person road shows, which is part of the constant feedback loop that helps us all improve over time, right? Is to ground truth what we're learning. This deck that we shared with you guys here on this call and the detailed presentation that David gave, we break that out as David described, on the metrics thing in regions. Well, we just do these roadshow visits too, where we just have the general kind of description about what's going on, and not like we're coming down from on high with all the answers. We call it co-creation. So if there's a region that wants to co-create a visit, leverage us to do what they want to advance already, we're up for that. And David's produced some reports of some of our early roadshows so you can get an idea of how they get co-created. They're all different, right? Because every region's different. We have one coming up in the Inland Empire in California, but there's some reports of other ones around the country. Yeah, just reach out to us and say, hey, we'd like to co-create a roadshow visit. Oftentimes, they are tethered to what David sometimes calls his tentpole events. Activities that are already happening, and then we come in and try to add value to it, or at that event or around that event. We've had road shows that are a couple of days. We've had them, week-long ones in particular regions, depending on the circumstance and demand and opportunities. So pretty organic. Yeah, that's it. That's that on the road shows. We've had a national conference. We partnered with the National Association of Counties and had a national conference this last December. That info is on our website, which we had all these federal agencies there, all these regions there, all of these researchers. There's so much research going on in terms of this ecosystem approach that we're describing. It's got different lingo depending on the researchers, place-based initiatives, cluster approach. There's all this different stuff, but it all has the kind of the same component parts. Like, how do we create more collective impact by working together authentically, building trust and getting to where we need to go much faster than our fragmented 20th century systems have allowed so far. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add, Matt, that last link I put in there, which is the recordings of our summit that we held in December. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there, but among them, if you want to listen or learn more about what we were just describing here, this community ecosystem metrics work, we did have a full session at that event that includes some CMU and Deloitte leaders talking about their versions of what we're all working on. So we're in this sort of, kind of open knowledge space where we're sharing with each other our respective developments. And if you run into anyone who's doing something like this, we'd love to know, because we want to learn from them and bring them in. This is a really broad challenge that we have the manufacturing use case, but you could apply this to other sectors very readily. And so we're all trying to build towards something that can make this data a lot more accessible for anyone to use to make smarter interventions for their region.
All right, well, I think
Okay.
if there's no other questions, I'll go ahead and wrap us here. Just another plug for the post-event survey. We would love to hear from you, your opinions on the materials we shared today. And I want to thank AMCC for joining us. Thank you, NIST, as well, for being on the call. And I appreciate everyone's time. Any last words, Matt or David?
No, just thank you, Dion. Appreciate the partnership with NATO and the community of practice, and looking forward to deepening and broadening that partnership. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks all.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.